1942, Egypt. A batch of early American M1 bazookas arrives at a British testing ground. The commanders are desperate, truly desperate, for anything that can stop a tank. They arrange a demonstration against a captured German Panzer III. The soldier fires. The rocket screams across the sand. It hits. It penetrates. The weapon works perfectly. It is light, it is futuristic, and it is effective. And the British commanders look at it, look at the hole it punched in the steel, and say, "No thank you." To the Americans, this looked like madness. To history, it might look like arrogance, or perhaps that classic British bureaucratic stubbornness that refuses to admit someone else had a better idea. But it was neither. The British said no because they had already bet their survival on something else, something that looked crude, felt brutal, and operated on principles the rest of the world had laughed at. It was a weapon that weighed nearly twice as much as the bazooka. It required the strength of an Olympic weightlifter just to cock it. It kicked like a mule and looked like a piece of industrial plumbing gone wrong. But it could do one thing the bazooka never could. It could fire from inside a small room without killing everyone behind the trigger. In the hedgerows of Normandy and the ruins of Arnhem, that single advantage, the ability to hide in a house and kill a tank, would destroy 7% of all German armor in the opening months of D-Day. This is the story of the PIAT, the weapon that looked like a plumber's nightmare but outperformed the Air Force. To understand why Britain rejected the future, you first have to understand the sheer panic of 1940. German armor had completely outpaced infantry defenses. At the start of the war, the British infantryman's answer to a tank was the Boy's anti-tank rifle. It was a heavy bolt-action rifle firing a .55 caliber solid slug. Against the light tanks of the 1930s, it was adequate. Against the panzers of 1940, it was a joke. It was effectively a door knocker that told the tank crew exactly where you were hiding. If you saw a tank, you had two options: run or die. The infantry needed a portable cannon. They needed something a single man could carry that could punch through 50, 70, or 100 millimeters of hardened steel. Physics offered a solution: the shaped charge or high-explosive anti-tank round. The concept is terrifyingly elegant. You take a cone of copper and back it with high explosives. When it detonates, it inverts that copper cone into a hypersonic jet of molten metal moving at 25,000 feet per second. It doesn't rely on velocity to smash through armor. It burns its way through like a hot needle through butter. But here was the problem: how do you throw it? A shaped charge needs to hit the target relatively slowly. If you fire it out of a normal cannon, the spin of the shell ruins the jet. You need a gentle delivery system. The Americans chose rockets. The Germans chose rockets. The British? They chose a giant spring. Enter Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Blacker. He was an Indian Army veteran, an eccentric, and a tinkerer who had spent a decade annoying the War Office with his designs for something called a Spigot mortar. His idea was bizarre. Conventional weapons use a barrel to hold a shell. Blacker proposed a steel rod, the spigot. The bomb would have a hollow tail that slid over the rod. When you pulled the trigger, the rod struck a charge inside the tail, launching the bomb forward. Crucially, the explosion would push the rod backward against a massive spring, absorbing the recoil and recocking the weapon for the next shot. No barrel to explode, no expanding gases to manage, and most importantly, no rocket exhaust. Blacker's early prototypes were disasters. They misfired, they fell apart, and the Ordnance Board destroyed him in their reports. They essentially called his work useless and dangerous. But the desperation of the war saved him. The idea was moved to MD1, Churchill's secret weapons lab, affectionately nicknamed the Toy Shop. There, an engineer named Major Millis Jeffers took Blacker's Spigot concept and mated it with a newly designed, highly effective hollow charge warhead. By August 1942, a full month before the Americans even showed off the bazooka, production began on the Projector Infantry Anti-Tank, the PIAT. If you handed a modern soldier a PIAT, they would likely ask where the rest of it was. It was a beast. 32 pounds of steel and sheet metal, 39 inches long. It fired a 3-pound bomb that could penetrate 100 millimeters of hardened armor, enough to kill almost anything the Germans could field, including the Tiger tank if you hit it from the side. But there was a catch. The cocking mechanism. This is the stuff of nightmares for the infantrymen. To cock the PIAT, you couldn't just pull a lever. The main spring was incredibly stiff. It had to be to absorb the recoil of a 3-pound bomb. To cock it, a soldier had to stand up, place the weapon on its butt, step on the shoulder pad, unlock the handle, and pull upward with his entire body weight. It required 200 pounds of force. Imagine doing that in the mud. Imagine doing that while machine gun fire is chewing up the dirt around you. If you missed your first shot, trying to reload while lying prone was physically impossible for all but the strongest men. You had to expose yourself to reload. Compare that to the American Bazooka, 18 pounds, sleek, tube-shaped, electric ignition, easy to load. A child could fire it. So we return to the question, why? Why did Britain stick with the heavy, difficult, spring-loaded pipe? It all comes down to the whoosh. When a bazooka fires, a jet of flame and toxic gas screams out the back of the tube. This is called backblast. It creates a danger zone of about 15 to 20 meters behind the shooter. If you stand behind a bazooka when it fires, you get burned. If you fire a bazooka inside a small room, the overpressure bounces off the walls and can kill you, or at the very least, rupture your eardrums and knock you unconscious. Furthermore, that blast kicks up a massive cloud of dust and debris. If you fire a bazooka in a dry field, you are essentially lighting a giant flare that says to every German tank, sniper, and machine gunner within a mile, "Here I am, shoot me." The PIAT had no backblast, none, zero. Because the explosion happened inside the tail of the bomb and was absorbed by the spring, there was no fire out the back. A British paratrooper in Arnhem could hide deep inside the shadows of a bedroom, fire through a window, and the only sound was a dull thud. The lack of flash and smoke meant they could hit a tank and vanish before the enemy crew even knew where the shot came from. This was the no to the bazooka. The British doctrine relied on urban combat, hedgerows, and ambush. In the tight stone ruins of France and Italy, the bazooka was a liability. The PIAT was a ghost. There were other factors too. The bazooka's warhead in the early models was notoriously weak. It often bounced off the sloped armor of the German Panthers. The PIAT's warhead was heavier, slower, and stuck the landing better. It rarely bounced. If you hit the tank, you usually took it out. However, technology marches on. The PIAT was an evolutionary dead end. The Spigot mortar concept died with the war. It was too heavy, too complex to manufacture, and the range was simply too short for modern warfare. By the 1950s, even Britain swallowed its pride and switched to the Super Bazooka, and later to the Carl Gustaf and the Law. The bazooka was the ancestor of the future. The RPG, the AT-4, the Javelin, they all trace their DNA back to that American rocket tube. The PIAT has no children. It sits in museums, a strange spring-loaded curiosity. So, looking back, was the Rejection a mistake? Should the British have taken the American rockets in 1942? History says no. Britain didn't say no to the bazooka because they thought the PIAT was a perfect weapon. They knew it was heavy. They knew it kicked. They knew the sights were crude. They said no because in 1942 they looked at the map of Europe. They saw the narrow streets of Italian villages, the dense stone ruins of French towns, and the thick, suffocating hedges of Normandy. They realized that a weapon you can't
Smash that like button and subscribe for more secrets like this. See you next time.